My name is Steve Shelley, and amongst other things, I act as the chair of Jonathan Scott's Sacred Nature Initiative. I'm a board member of the Society of Environmental Authors and Journalists, long-time conservationist, wildlife enthusiastic, lived a long time in Kenya. And now I like to call myself a filmmaker with a
Mm.
very strong interest in wildlife and nature and environmental issues. So Simon, thanks very much for joining us. But there may well be some people watching this, or indeed coming to the bird fair, who may not know who you are. So why don't we start by giving a bit of a backstory?
Yeah, it depends how far back we want to go. Yeah, I have pursued life, pursued nature with great enthusiasm as a boy. I used to go catch the 49 bus when I was about 9 and 10 to the Natural History Museum every Saturday. These in the days before paedophilia phobia. Um, Lost the faith as a teenager, but refound it again in my late 20s. And yes, I've had a convert zeal, a born again zeal to go with it. Yeah, I wrote my first wildlife book was Flying in the Face of Nature. It was called, about a year in the life of Minsmere. And I was also asked to write a column for the Times on wildlife, and then I was asked not to write it on account of the fact that uh, I'm under an NDA on this subject.
Okay.
So I was asked not to write it. Then I was asked to write it again some years later, and was writing two wildlife columns a week for the newspaper while working as chief sports writer at the same time. A double that, yes, that still surprises some people. It's perfectly natural to me, but there you go. And at the same time, I've written lots and lots of books about wildlife, kind of all trying to put myself in a missionary position, as it were, to kind of often to help not the hugely knowledgeable, but to kind of to open doors like the good teacher does, to say, this, come on, this is fabulous, and you want to know more and you want to do more.
Yeah, absolutely. When you have that passion and interest in wildlife, it does get you like that, doesn't it? You want to share it and get other people to share the joy as well.
Indeed, well, you've led more safaris than I have, but it's one of the great pleasures when somebody really gets it. Not just somebody gets it as you want them to get it.
Yeah.
I remember I was co-leading a safari in the Luangwa Valley in Zambia, and there's a point when we abandon vehicles and we spend a week in the bush camps and just walk. I don't see a vehicle at all. And one of the clients said to me, "I don't think I'll walk this morning. God, this is really terrible." And I said, "It's fine. We'll take it very, very gently. We know we don't have to go far. Every step you take, there's a wonderful story to tell." She said, "No, I just want to stay in the camp." So I thought, oh Lord, this whole thing is a disaster. Anyway, we then took out the clients who were willing to walk, and we had a lovely walk. And I came back, and there she was, still sitting outside her hut. And I said, "Are you all right?" She said, "That was the most beautiful morning of my life."
Can you remember the first time that you went to Africa and
Oh, yes, very vividly.
yeah,
Um,
tell me about
uh,
that.
yeah, I went, it was 1989, and I went with Wildlife Worldwide. No, I didn't. I went with a different company, but my guide was Chris Breen, who now runs Wildlife Worldwide. And it's fondly remembered by some as the only time I shut up for about a fortnight on end. I just sat there. I could not believe that a place so wonderful should exist. I can still. I've occasionally wondered about doing a book for some charity or other, in which is called "The Beer of My Life," in which you recount the best beer you ever had in all your life. And mine was sitting on the edge of the Luangwa River on the bank with my feet dangling down and a bottle of Mosey beer in my hands. And 200 yards away, with her feet dangling over the edge of the Luangwa River, was a lioness. And 50 yards on from her was another, and 50 yards on from her was another.
It does get you, doesn't it? Just to share very briefly, I went on my first out of Europe long haul holiday was to Kenya, and on the back of that, I came home, bought a Land Rover, and drove back to Africa, and didn't come home for 30 years.
Yes, yeah, it's a dangerous bloody place.
You're obviously a very prolific author as well. I mean, tell me a bit about your writing career. I mean, more books than articles.
Yeah, I did started off with sports books, had and then started writing some natural history books, and I had a hit with a book called How to Be a Bad Bird Watcher, which was exactly that missionary position book. And I must say, it still gives me pleasure to think of. I still get royalties from it. There was a 20-year anniversary edition last year, and that was all very delightful. But the most delightful thing of all is occasionally people tell me, or occasionally people send me an email saying, you changed my life. For the better, I do hope.
Oh yes.
And they say, "Oh yes, you showed me birds." Well, it's not me that changed the life; it was the birds. They do the hard work. Yeah. But if I did some pointing, then I'm very deeply happy about that. And subsequently, I've done four novels, which one of which was set in the African bush, and it has a disclaimer at the front. Normally you say all the characters and incidents are wholly fictional. In this, I said all the wildlife-human interactions are wholly factual and come from my wildlife notebooks. Yeah. Including the one with the lion, and etc. etc. So, and that was nice. And lately, I've got out this year a book called How to Be a Bad How to Be a Bad Botanist was last year, which was very nice and it's a nice book. I've become a born again botanist. I've never really looked at plants before. Why not? Why be such a fool? So anyway, I'm now doing that. But this year I have a book called Spring is the Only Season.
So for those people who would like to come and listen to you at the Bird Fair, what will you be talking about? Give yourself an unashamed promotion.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a debt long owed rather than anything that's going to do me any financial good. When I first went to Zambia, I was with a man called Bob Schoenstedt. You may have heard of him. He's the son of a Swedish baron, held the title himself. He was a genius on bird call, there are so many Bob stories, and will tell some of them in my talk. You will know the kind of English person who gets lost in Africa somewhere. I mean, many people thought that Bob was mad, bad, and dangerous to know, but me, I'd have faced a charging lion with him. And in fact, I once did. That will remain a story for another day. In fact, I will tell that story in the talk I get. So basically, what I want to do is celebrate Bob, not just for the million funny stories about it, but celebrate his genius, his sense of wonder, his generosity, his ability to share it. He and Chris Breen, Wildlife Worldwide, and I and Errol Mushindu of the Livingstone Museum made a wonderful crazed expedition to Northwest Province to look for Pearson cisticola, for example. And we did huge number of new records for two of the unexplored squares for the Zambian Bird Atlas.
But in terms of claims to fame, I think you probably have quite a lot casting back. I've seen pictures of you with people, dare I say, like David Attenborough and other well-known.
I'm very happy to it. I mean, you can get a knighthood, or you can get an MBE, or you can get a companion of honor. Me, I can have a BPDA, which is bought a pint for David Attenborough.
I think that's pretty cool.
I reckon. I mean, I want no further honour than that.
Absolutely.
I did 2 6-year stints for World Land Trust when the great John Burton was the CEO, and David Attenborough was the patron of that organisation. He had an association with John because John raised money for the Rwanda guerrillas after that famous sequence was filmed for Life on Earth. So he had an instinct. It was when John asked, he said he felt he owed, and when David owes, he pays. And so he did that. And so I had the great pleasure of meeting him there. I remember our first meeting at the double-decker library in the Linnean Society. And as extraordinary chance would have it, I was standing by the drinks table, and as equally extraordinary chance would have it, David was advancing on it with an empty glass. So I filled it on my own, and we had a conversation. And as a result of the World Land Trust and various other professional things, I interviewed him several times, and had the worst thing, the absolute worst thing the World Land Trust ever asked me to do was to speak at a meeting of big-time city donors and potential donors. And they said, and we want you to close things up and speak and sum up at the end. I said, no, absolutely not. No, I refuse to do that. Okay, I'll open the show cold. Don't mind doing that. But you don't think I'm going to stand up and talk about wildlife and conservation if it means following David Attenborough? And they said, no, we would like you, a weak character. And Burton was persuaded me to do it. And so I did. And so I said, I was appalled at this task of having to follow David Attenborough. But then I realized that I had been following David Attenborough all my life. In fact, if I was to write a personal memoir of him, it would have to be, David, you had me at Piccathartes. The white-necked Piccathartes was the star of the first Zoo Quest show that he broadcast in 1954. And I went on to say that, in fact, the world would be a great deal better if everybody was to follow David Attenborough.
Well, that's words of wisdom that I think a lot of people going to the bird fair would share. Thinking about the Global Bird Fair, I mean, what you're describing about crossing paths and bumping into people, the bird fair is one of those places, isn't it, where virtually anybody in the conservation world is likely to be sitting catching a pint and waiting to see who they know. Have you had that experience?
Exactly. The last time I was, I mean, that's kind of what brings me back again and again. Because often with World Land Trust, I've traveled around to projects all over the world to write about them for various newspapers and magazines. And yeah, last time I was there, I was having a drink with Vivek Menon from Wildlife Trust of India, when who should turn up but Pham Tuan An from Viet Nature in Vietnam. And they hadn't met, but we had. And then Martin Davis, who you might just bumped into, turned up as well. So yes, it was a gathering of the clans and a nice couple of glasses.
Yes, absolutely. I find it fascinating. I mean, this year there are people coming from Vanuatu, from Gough Island, from the Falklands. I mean, literally spanning the globe. It's an extraordinary gathering of people interested in nature and wildlife and conservation and travel.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, exciting times coming up when we get to share all those things, and a lot of people will come and listen to your talk. I'm very sure of that. Projects on the horizon, current activities?
I've got to finish my current book, which is about flying. It's going to involve insects, pterosaurs, bats, birds, angels, Harry Potter, Superman, Orville and Wilbur helicopters. The day I flew to Concorde from London to Edinburgh, day I flew in a microlight over the Luangwa River. It's all going to be about the glories and the joys of flight. Bar-headed geese that fly over the Himalayas, bar-tailed godwits that fly from Alaska to New Zealand. The whole wonder and glory of flight. The book begins, I never saw a swift without wanting to be one. And that is the theme that runs through the book like Brighton through a stick of rock.
I was once, when I was an undergraduate, a swift flew and got caught into a sash window and we're at the place I was staying.
Oh, in the middle of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I had to extract it manually, and I found exactly the same thing. I found myself pulling the wings out and thought,
Yeah.
this has had an aerodynamicist involved in doing
Absolutely that. Absolutely that. No, they are a speed flights straight and level. They're also superb gliders.
Yeah,
And if you watch one, pick one out from a gathering and watch it closely, you'll notice they will often fly with the wings down in what's called an anhedral angle. And that
yes,
gives for great instability, high maneuverability.
yeah,
Swift will always back himself when it comes to control, even in that anhedral position.
yeah. I find it absolutely fascinating coming back to Africa to be. I was in Kenya last a year ago in March, watching the swallows gathering on the telephone wires in Kenya, knowing
Yeah,
that a mere month later here they would be
yeah, absolutely.
flying around the UK.
Yeah,
It's absolutely wonderful to see
yeah.
that.
See you back at my place.
Yeah, exactly. Well, talking of which, maybe we'll be able to catch up for a pint at the bird fair. So
That will be an absolute delight.
it'd be great fun. So I'll say thank you very much for your time and your stories, and we look forward to hearing an awful lot more at the Global Bird Fair in July.
I'll be there celebrating Africa, celebrating African birds, and celebrating the great Bob Schoenstedt.
Excellent. Simon, thank you very
Not
much.
at all. Thank
See
you
you
very
soon.
much indeed. Be seeing you.
Take care.
See you in Rutland.